This is audiobook recorded by Swagata Shaha, and the book is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Chapter 1. There was no possibility of taking a walk that day. We had been wandering indeed in the leafless shrubbery an hour in the morning. But since dinner, Mrs. Reed, when there was no company, dined early. The cold winter wind had brought with it clouds so sombre and a rain so penetrating that further outdoor exercise was now out of question. I was glad of it. I never liked long walks, especially on chilly afternoons. Dreadful to me was the coming home in the raw twilight, with nipped fingers and toes, and heart saddened by the chidings of Bessie, the nurse, and humbled by the consciousness of my physical inferiority to Eliza, John, and Georgiana Reed. They said Eliza, John, and Georgiana were now clustered round their mamma in the drawing room. She lay reclined on a sofa by the French side, and with her darling about her, for the time neither quarrelling nor crying, looked perfectly happy. Me she had dispensed from joining the group, saying she regretted to be under the necessity of keeping me at a distance, but that until she heard from Bessie and could discover by her own observations that I was endeavouring in good earnest to acquire a more sociable and childlike disposition, a more attractive and sprightly manner, something lighter, franker, more natural as it were. She really must exclude me from privileges intended only for contented, happy little children. What does Bessie say I have done? I asked. Jane, I don't like cavaliers or questionnaires. Besides, there is something truly forbidding in a child talking up her elders in that manner. Be seated somewhere, and until you can speak pleasantly, remain silent. A small breakfast room adjoined the drawing room. I slipped in there. It contained a bookcase. I soon possessed myself of a volume, taking care that it should be one stored with the pictures. I mounted into the window seat, gathering up my feet. I sat cross-legged like a turret, and having drawn red moreen curtain nearly close, I was shrined in double retirement. Folds of scarlet drapery shut in my view to the right hand. To the left were the clear panes of glass protecting but not separating me from the dear November day. At intervals, while turning over the leaves of my book, I studied the aspect of that winter afternoon. Afar, it offered a pale blank of mist and cloud, near a scene of wet lawn and a storm-bare shrub, with the ceaseless rain sweeping away wildly before a long and lamentable blast. I returned to my book, Bewick's History of British Birds. The letterpress thereof I cared little for, generally speaking, and yet there were certain introductory pages that a child like I was, I could not pass quite as blank. That they were those which treat of haunts of seafowl, of the little solitary rocks and promontories by then only inhabited, of the coast of Norway studded with isles from its southern extremity, the Landes or Naze to the North Cape, where the Northern Ocean, in vast Wales, boils round the naked, melancholy isles of furthest Thule, and the Antarctic surge pours in among the stormy Hebrides. Nor could I pass unnoticed the suggestion of blank shores of Lapland, Siberia, Spitsbergen, Nova Zembla, Iceland, Greenland, with the vast sweep of Arctic zone, those forlorn regions of dreary space, that reservoir of frost and snow, where firm fields of ice, the accumulation of centuries of winter, gazelled in alpine heights above heights, surrendered the pole and concentrated the multiplied rigor of extreme cold. Of these death white realms, I formed an idea of my own, shadowy like all the half comprehended notions that float dim through children's brain, but strangely impressive. The words in these introductory pages connected themselves with succeeding vignettes and have significance to rocks standing up alone in a sea of billow and spray, to the broken boat stranded on desolate coast, to the cold and ghastly moon glancing through bars of cloud at a wreck just sinking. I cannot tell what sentiment haunted the quiet solitary churchyard, with its inscribed headstone, its gate, its two trees, its low horizon gilded by broken wall, and its newly risen crescent, attesting the hour of eventide. The two ships becalmed on a torpid sea I believe to be marine phantoms. The faint pinning down the thief's back behind him, I passed over quickly. It was an object of terror. So was the black horned thing seated aloof on a rock, surveying a distant crowd surrounding a gallows. Each picture told a story, mysterious, often to my underdeveloped understanding and imperfect feelings, yet over profoundly interesting as the tales Bessie sometimes narrated on winter evenings, when she chanced to be in a good mood, and when having brought her ironing table to the nursing hearth, she allowed us to sit about it, and while she got up Mrs. Reed's lace frills and crimped her nightcap borders, fed her eager attention with passages of love and adventure taken from old fairy tales and other ballads, or, as at a later period I discovered, from the pages of Pamela and Henry, Earl of Moreland. With Bewick on my knee, I was then happy at least in my way. I feared nothing but interruption, and that came too soon. The breakfast room door opened. "Boh, Madam Mope!" cried the voice of John Reed. Then he paused. He found the room apparently empty. "Where the dickens is she?" he continued. "Lizzie, Georgie," calling to his sisters. "John is not here. Tell Mamma she's run out into the rain. Bad animal." It is well I drew the curtain, thought I, and I wished fervently he might not discover my hiding place, nor would John Reed have found it out himself. He was not quite either of vision or a conception, but Eliza just put her head in at the door and said at once, "She is in the window seat, to be sure, Jack." And I came out immediately, for I trembled at the idea of being dragged forth by the said Jack. "What do you want?" I asked, with awkward diffidence. "Say, what do you want, Master Reed?" was the answer. "I want you to come here." And seating himself in an armchair, he intimated by a gesture that I was to approach and stand before him. John Reed was a schoolboy of 14 years old, 4 years older than I, for I was but 10, large and stout for his age, with a dingy and unwholesome skin, thick lineament in a spacious visage, heavy limbs, and large extremities. He gorged himself habitually at table, which made him bilious and gave him a dim and bleared eye and flabby cheeks. He ought now have to at school, but his mamma had taken him home for a month or two on account of his delicate health. Mr. Miles, the master, affirmed that he would do very well if he had fewer cakes and sweetmeats sent him from home. But the mother's heart turned from an opinion so harsh and inclined rather to the more refined idea that John's shallowness was owing to over-application and perhaps to pinning after home. John had not much affection for his mother and sisters, and an antipathy to me. He bullied and punished me, not 2 or 3 times in the week, nor once or twice in a day, but continually. Every nerve I have feared him. Every morsel of flesh in my bones shrank when he come near. There are moments when I was bewildered by the terror he inspired, because I have no apparel whatever against either his menaces or his instinctions. The servants did not like to offend their young master by taking my part against him, and Mrs. Reed was blinded and deaf on the subject. She never saw him strike or heard him abuse me, though he did both now and then in her very presence, more frequently, however, behind her back. Habitually obedient to John, I came to his chair. He spent some 3 minutes in thrashing out his tongue at me as far as he could without damaging the roots. I knew he would soon strike, and while dreading the blow, I mused on the disgusting and ugly appearance of him who would presently deal it. I wonder if he read the notion in my face, for all at once, without speaking, he struck suddenly and strongly. I tottered, regaining my equilibrium, retired back a step or 2 from his chair. "That is for your impudence in answering mamma while since," said he, "and for your sneaking way of getting behind curtains, and for the look you had in your eyes 2 minutes since, you rat." Accustomed to John Reed's abuse, I never had an idea of replying to it. My care was how to endure the blow which would certainly follow an insult. "What were you doing behind the curtain?" he asked. "I was reading." "Show the book." I returned to the window and fetched it thence. "You have no business to take our books. You are a dependent. Mamma says you have no money. Your father left you none. You ought to beg and not to live here with gentlemen's children like us, and eat the same meals we do, and wear clothes at our mamma's expense. Now I will teach you to rummage my bookshelves, for they are mine. All the house belongs to me, or will do in few years. Go and stand by the door, out of the way of the mirror and the windows." I did so, not at first aware of what was his intention. But when I saw him lift and poise the book and stand in act to hurl it, I instantly started aside with a cry of alarm. Not soon enough, however, the volume was flung. It hit me, and I fell, striking my head against the door and cutting it. The cut blade, the pain was sharp. My terror had passed its climax. Other feelings succeeded. "Wicked and cruel boy," I said. "You are like a murderer. You are like a slave driver. You are like the Roman emperors. I have read Goldsmith's History of Rome and formed my opinion of Nero, Caligula, etc. Also, I had drawn parallels in silence, which I had never thought thus to have declared aloud. What? He cried. "Did she say that to me? Did you hear her, Eliza Georgiana? Won't I tell mamma? But first," He ran headlong at me. I felt him grasp my hair and my shoulder. He had closed with desperate thing. I really saw him in a tyrant, a murderer. I felt a drop or two of blood from my head trickle down my neck and was sensible of somewhat pungent suffering. These sensations for the time predominated over fear. I received him in frantic shot. I did not very well know what I did with my hands, but he called me rat, rat, and bellowed out aloud. Aid was near me. Eliza and Georgiana had run for Mrs. Reed, who was gone upstairs. She now came upon the scene, followed by Bessie and her maid Abbott. We were parted. I heard the words, "Dear, dear, what a fury to fly at Master John! Did ever anybody see such a picture of passion?" Then Mrs. Reed subjoined, "Take her away to Red Room and lock her in there." 4 hands were immediately laid upon me. I was borne upstairs. This is end of chapter 1. Thank you for listening.